The Games of the 31st Olympiad have recently concluded in Rio de Janeiro, Brazil. The first time the Games have been held in South America saw 11,000 athletes over 19 days of competition. 207 countries were represented at the Games, including first-time participants Kosovo, South Sudan and the refugee Olympic team. After overcoming challenges such as construction delays, the Zika virus, athlete doping scandals, athlete robbery scandals, and green swimming pools, the Games were heralded as a success both athletically and commercially. Rio 2016 now holds the title of richest Games in the Olympic history. Television companies paid $4.3 billion for the rights to screen the Festival of Sport, with 11 global sponsors contributing to the $9.3 billion in marketing revenue. This is an astonishing figure and highlights how integral commercialisation is to the Olympic Games. However, to understand how we've arrived at such a momentous figure, we must look back some 32 years to the Games of the 23rd Olympiad, held in the City of Stars, Los Angeles, California, to see how Hollywood thinkers changed the course of the Olympic Games forever. That is the topic of tonight's episode of Sports Talk.
Welcome to another episode of Sports Talk. We're your hosts, Jake Marnie and Ren Thompson. And this episode is about the commercialisation of the Olympic Games. The Olympic Summer Games, as we see it today, is the most recognised sporting event in the world, drawing in billions of audiences across the globe, creating a huge television phenomenon.
For 2 weeks every 4 years, the focus of the media and the attention of the entire world is transfixed on the host city, as their countrymen and women compete in athletic pursuits for the greatest athletic honour, an Olympic gold medal. Because of the tremendous media phenomenon of the Olympics, they've also become a spectacularly successful vehicle for commercialisation, a far cry from what the modern Olympics were originally set up for, as being a competition for amateurs not needing commercial support. The commercial trend has only accelerated in the most recent decades of the Olympic Games, but it all started with LA '84. Previously, hosting the Olympic Games wasn't a very desirable thing to do. We only need to look at Montreal in 1976, where their debt exceeded $1.5 billion, which was only paid off in 2006. The 1980 Moscow Olympics were a political disaster, with 64 countries boycotting the Games, including the United States, because of the USSR's invasion of Afghanistan. This meant that the IOC was desperate for a successful Games in '84.
Ladies and gentlemen, at this time we are on our final approach into Los Angeles, the home of the 1984 Summer Olympics. We hope you've enjoyed your flight with us this afternoon, and from all of us at United, we hope you have a wonderful time at the Games.
Only two cities actually bid for the '84 Games, LA and New York. So LA became the winner by default, as the US could only recommend one city. These Games were the first in history not to be funded purely by the government. This created the need to run LA '84 on a budget. We can thank local businessman Peter Ubroth for the first ever commercialised Games. Peter organised a committee similar to that of any business corporation, including big-name entrepreneurs and financial savvy leaders. These Games allowed the US to assert Western capitalism's superiority over their Cold War communism foes. As a result, many US corporations used this Olympic Games because it was a peak spectacle on the global mediascape to provide the International Olympic Committee with lucrative endorsements. So, because of this new way of running the Games, we saw LA draw in unprecedented corporate sponsorship, such as McDonald's and Coca-Cola, and a record-breaking TV deal at the time with the ABC. The LA Olympics gave us not only an official Olympic soft drink, but also an Olympic fast food company. As a result, it was the first ever Olympics to produce a profit. Broadcasting rights generated over $286 million, resulting in a profit of over $222 million, with most of these profits going back into US sporting organisations and the US Olympic Amateur Athletic Foundation for sport promotion and development. You can't tell me that's not a positive change for Olympic Games, right?
But Jake, these Olympics also seem the end of what the Olympic movement was established for. The Olympic movement originally represented itself as a quintessential expression of peace and internationalism. The modern Olympics were envisioned by French aristocrat Pierre de Coubertin. De Coubertin fervently believed that the Games would promote peace and friendship between people. The Olympics were designed to encourage spectatorship, to watch the purity of sport. The Olympic Games, according to de Coubertin, the most significant thing in the Olympic Games is not to win, but to take part. It just is in life, the most important thing in life was not the triumph, but the struggle. The essential thing is not to have conquered, but have fought well.
I don't think you can safely say that the commercialisation of the Olympic Games tarnishes the Olympic spirit at all. You can find a happy medium. Just look at what Peter Ueberroth did with 84. A prime example was in the tradition of the torch relay. Ueberroth was able to draw in many sponsors, selling the flame at $3,000 per kilometre ran in the relay, with all proceeds going to a charity of the sponsor's choice. The selling of the torch relay was framed as a community initiative, mobilising thousands of volunteers, raising almost $11 million for these chosen charities. It drew over 3,500 volunteers, appealing to the American volunteering spirit, but also illuminating the Olympic spirit as well as marketing the commercial games.
But Jake, the Games weren't supposed to have an official drink sponsor or an official convenience store. The Games were not designed to be a spectacular vehicle of commercialism. It wasn't about that, and it surely wasn't meant to be about that in 2007, when even de Coubertin's tomb in Olympia was the site of olive tree planting to symbolise the Olympic movement's appreciation of the environment. But it also doubled as an opportunity for Coca-Cola to show that they were a supporter of the Games. This bizarre ritual showcases everything that was wrong with the emblematic commercial symbolism that has influenced the Games. Sport develops character in a way that books can't. Sports produces beauty in that the athlete is engendered as a living sculpture. Well, that's what de Coubertin thought anyway, because there's a beauty in amateur sport, because it is pure, it is absent of corruption that has infected modern society. The Games were established with the highest ideals of amateurism, cosmopolitanism, and holistically world peace. That was championed through the entire ethos of the modern Olympics. But they weren't meant to be a plaything of the world's biggest corporations.
The Olympics are a competition of elite performers. Competition in sports is congenial for commercialism. But this is nothing new. Even athletes in the ancient Olympics were professionals who competed for prize money, often becoming wealthy. The very concept of amateurism did not exist in classical Greek culture. I mean, the Greek word athlete meant the one who competes for a prize. And from almost the beginning of the Games, athletes were paid financially by their home cities, and often handsomely. Nothing has changed. These Olympic athletes are the best in the world at what they do, so why shouldn't they get rewarded? If it wasn't for the commercialisation of the Games, athletes wouldn't be able to even support themselves. Look at track and field for an example. The World Diamond League only brings in $10,000 if an athlete is lucky enough to even win an event. Thank God the Olympics is a huge marketing tool. Athletes such as Usain Bolt, he has lucrative endorsements because he's a successful athlete. Athletes like Mary Lou Retton, Sebastian Coe, the American men's basketball team, they all became instantly recognisable. But it was Carl Lewis with his 4 gold medals that was the start of the Olympics. Carl Lewis had a chance in the LA Games to break the world long jump record, but he was persuaded instead to save his strength and try to win as many events as he could. His eventual 4 gold medals led to untold millions in supplementary endorsements.
Well, what we need to realise, Jake, is that the Olympic Games are simply that, they're games. There are winners and there are losers and there is competition. The issue is that as a society we assume that the winners are superior in some way, and that this notion of being superior and being a winner comes with the intense rewards that you have mentioned through commercialisation. However, have you ever stopped to think that this could be a disadvantage to the Olympic Games? That because it means the athletes are going to do whatever it takes to become the winner, and for some that could mean cheating and doping. Athletes have used various drugs to enhance performance, to improve strength, speed, fine motor skills. Drugs like anabolic steroids, human growth hormone, have all been around for many years. It has been reported that about 7% of young athletes will dope at some stage during their career. That's an astounding number. Especially when you think of it, that would be 800 athletes at the most recent Olympic Games have experimented with doping in their careers, with the allure of the riches that come from being a winner. The athletes that take the Olympic oath during the opening ceremony, saying they will uphold the ethos of these games and the fair play. However, it seems that just as drugs in society is such a problem, so is drugs in sport a complex issue. It has almost become an unofficial Olympic sport, trying to dodge and evade these doping officials. This was evident with the Russian athletics team being banned from the entire Rio Olympics. But even looking back to the heroes of LA '84, someone like Carl Lewis, a 4-time Olympic gold medalist, was revealed years later that he himself was a drug user and that his drug escapades were covered by the US Olympic team in an effort possibly to protect their commercial interests from being represented by a cheater. It has almost become a case of citizens and spectators crossing their fingers and hoping that their urine samples of their favourite athletes won't come back with a negative result. I fear for what would happen if someone like Usain Bolt came back and was revealed as a drug cheat. That would be the tipping point to install even tighter provisions. And even though the goal may be ambitious, it should always be kept in mind that the fight against doping is a fight for not only the protection of the clean athlete, but the health of that athlete, but also for the integrity of sport, but also to hold up the legacy of the host city.
But as I mentioned before, no city in the world wanted to host the Olympic Games in 1984 because they weren't able to gain a profit with the non-commercialised games. Now, because these cities are able to generate a huge exposure hosting the Olympics, it gives themselves massive civic pride, making them a world city. A chance for these smaller cities to be put onto the map, and in the case of LA, the Olympics gave them a chance to rebrand themselves. In 1992, at the Barcelona Games, for example, it was able to pull the city out of the shadow of their sister city Madrid, and now they are reaping the rewards through an increased level of tourism. There's obviously big costs involved with hosting the Olympics, but with strategic plans like we saw with LA '84, only upgrading facilities rather than building expensive new ones, cities now have the potential to generate significant profit and in the process change their legacy.
But Jake, don't you think nowadays the International Olympic Committee just asks too much of these host cities to appease their own image and ultimately their commercial partners? I mean, let's face it, the ISD wants these cities to look great, but you're saying that they're hoping to keep a lasting legacy.
Yes, however, these legacies can include urban regeneration, renewing their community's spirit, and ultimately providing a vivid and emotional experience. And this can happen by embracing commercialism and sponsors. Take for example the Vancouver Winter Olympics. It showcased how major sponsors can be engaged to help the host city's legacy. For example, Ronald McDonald House Charities built playgrounds in Vancouver, and the Canadian arm of Coca-Cola invested $350,000 for Vancouver's inner city, creating an outdoor sport court for the residents. These are examples of tangible benefits that the sponsor has contributed and paid for the city, that will remain long after the games have left town. Not to mention the extremely positive intangible legacy of the enhancement of the destination image through increased awareness from the TV coverage of the Olympic Games.
Although, Jake, after the television cameras have left, they won't capture the negative impacts on the city, the mounting debts from massive stadium constructions, the high opportunity costs, unneeded infrastructure, possibly may even lose those tourists that they had in the first place. For the cities and corporate sponsors of the Games, Olympianism and its doctrine of universality are not much more than a philosophy of convenience, a prepackaged ideology ready to be adapted when the Olympic Games come to town. Commercialism of the Olympics has even been impacting major cities' attempts at hosting the Games. The city of Chicago in the United States weren't able to put a bid in for the 2016 Games because of their affiliation with McDonald's. McDonald's was founded in Chicago, and so many of their board members had influence over people in that city that the IOC said they couldn't apply that there. A monumental impact on bringing the Games to their home city. And you even said it yourself with the Olympic Flame Journey. That was heavily commercialised and sponsored. Host cities now are spending massive amounts of money. The City of London spent $11 billion on infrastructure ready for the Games. Rio is already in excess of $4 billion. And Tokyo in 2020 is estimated to be $15 billion, 6 times what they initially wanted, all to appease these sponsors. The question comes, when will this need to appease commercial sponsorship end?